Bitcoin's at its all-time high.
Bitcoin's riding high.
Yeah, 79,000 USDs.
Nice.
I guess.
Yeah.
nice for people who have
Nice for
Bitcoin.
people
I
that have
suppose.
Bitcoin. Yeah.
It's another one of these. Yeah, I mean, you have more to say about this than I do, but kind of like failed countercultural things in a weird
Bitcoin?
way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of So when it first started, it was literally created as a response to the 2008 like
crash,
subprime
yeah.
mortgage, right? It was like encoded into the first block of Bitcoin is the headline from, I think, the day it was released, where it was a chancellor on the brink of second bailout. I think German chancellor.
Right.
But basically it was it German? Anyway, it was in direct reference to the 2008 crash.
Lehman crash, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that's already like been around that long.
Right.
It's like actually pretty long, right?
Right.
28.
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah.
Well, that's the most impressive thing about it, I think, is just the resilience of the technology and how it's stayed running. Basically with zero downtime since 2009, I guess.
2009.
Yeah, it's
already,
like January 2009.
It's already like quite a long time,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty, it is pretty interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just the idea of like you can be your own bank and like, let's get rid of these sort of financial middlemen who, are proxies for censorship and, they'll just, essentially take your money, right? Use your tax dollars to fund wars or whatever, sort of that kind of countercultural narrative around finance. And then, like fast forward, I don't know, 10 years and everyone's begging for like hedge funds and financial institutions to get into Bitcoin to like pump the price.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of almost gone full circle.
Kind of selling out, right?
Yeah.
Selling out.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is selling out. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's the technology is certainly legit and there's something there. Unfortunately, the direction it's kind of looking at the moment is blockchain and cryptocurrency will be used to create
like a state coin or something.
Yeah. They call them CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And like a digital dollar, a digital Japanese yen, Chinese yuan.
Yeah.
The technology will be used to reduce the financial overhead and bookkeeping required for running a currency, right? But it'll also make it very easy to like lock you out of the system, right? Literally just tap a button, freeze your account.
Someone's frozen.
Yeah.
Rather than cuts down on people. That's another reason I'm still such a cash hoarder, because I guess it's that like stereotype of like dude that has like a bunch of cash under the bed or something, because it's like at least your account's not going to get like frozen, or you can't just immediately get disabled or whatever. There's that element of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty anti-cash overall. I guess just in terms of lifestyle. Like,
what is annoying? I mean, it has that whole physical aspect where you're slowing down and using it. But
it's funny because it's also just like monopoly money, right? Like it's literally just pieces of paper issued by the state, and like we worship it, right?
It's like not really anything.
Literally just paper, right? I mean, look at
or plastic. Increasingly
plastic, right? Have you seen like stuff coming out of like Venezuela where they show like what it takes to like buy a loaf of bread, and there's people
it's
with
like a wheelbarrow of money or something.
A loaf of bread is like a shoebox filled with bills. And they have like live at the store, they have like live tickers or whatever that updates. So like, by the time you grab your bread and walk to the
you need another wheelbarrow or something, or shoebox or whatever.
I mean, exaggerated, but like just free fall in terms of currency value.
Interestingly, the Spartans, like if I remember right, the Spartans used like metal bricks or something as money, and they like deliberately designed it to be like hard to use, so it wouldn't become like a money society. Really.
Interesting.
So they're like, okay, yeah, like you can have money, but it like sort of should be kind of unwieldy or like hard to use, so you don't get more preoccupied with the money rather than actual like production or something, or economic stability or economic production or whatever. Yeah. Not that I think their economy made terribly much sense either, but
their economy was what, basically slaves?
Yeah.
Right.
Like slave agriculture.
Yeah.
And well, very small minority of citizens, and then vast majority of like agricultural slaves. And I think they actually had rituals where they like shamed the slaves or something. I think if I remember right, there's like some festival where the citizens, which is again is like 10% of the population or something, would like go around like shaming the, just like wedging the slaves in public, or like making sure they weren't like above their station or something.
Right.
Like just like bullying them in public is like a festival. Like 10%, like the elites would literally just like go around, like Halloween and play pranks on the majority for
just for fun.
Well, just to like tool them, right? Just to be like, oh, you guys are slaves, like you suck. Like don't be thinking you're as good as us, like we're the elites. Like we can just like tool you and pull your pants down, and
which begs the question, is now too different?
Yeah. It's funny to think of that. So I'm not sure they're well. I think their economy was very strange by any modern outlook, but it certainly was very like slave based, which
begs the question, is now too different?
Not too different in most ways, but there is that. At least when they make those movies about Sparta, like they don't really like show that. Like it seems like a very individualist and like liberated society, when it was like completely not that at all. But
well, I mean, I still think back to the point that our mutual friend made, or you made as well, that the idea of the Spartan movies, or what, warrior movies in general, being funded by the army or the military to basically create
like recruitment drives.
It's like to create the narrative of some like kind of eternal, timeless like warrior experience.
Right. There's there's that. I think there definitely is that recruitment drive element to these movies.
It's a pretty badass movie though. 300.
Yeah, that's Frank Miller too.
Oh yeah. Oh, interesting.
We were just talking about Frank Miller. Yeah.
So what? Sin City.
Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, Sin City, 300. The one we're talking about, Holy Terror, which is the controversial one. What else was he? Oh, he did Ronin, Daredevil. He did Daredevil. All kinds of stuff. Very influential. As well as some very strange Batman, more recent things.
300, Daredevil. Yeah, okay. So you basically hit all the big ones. Yeah.
But you didn't recognize his name.
No, I didn't.
Before that. Yeah. It's funny how that works. I was talking about with Aaron, I think, and or someone else, and we were just like, these creators still seem like weirdly like Alan Moore or Frank Miller. Like people are like, oh, who's this would used to happen to me. People would be like, oh, who's Alan Moore? And I'm like, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, blah, blah, blah. Or like, 15 different things. And they're like, what? It's like all one guy. Or Frank Miller, like 300, Sin City, Batman, like just Wolverine, like all these. It's not really that many creators, right? But they're like not really household names, I guess. Even though if you really think about it, they're like, still kind of is like a handful of creators that are coming out with a lot of this stuff, or a lot of these like movies, I guess, for better or worse. Yeah. I think Frank Miller was gonna do the other side. Like he had some like Persian comic or something where he's trying to. I don't know if he ever did this, but I think he was gonna go back and try to show the other side or whatever
of the whole
300.
Of 300. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if he ever did that or not.
That villain was pretty badass from 300 with the chains and the armor. He had this like chain whip.
Yeah, but
it looked like all gothic and like
you could have like shown actual historical Persians, which like probably would have been even cooler, because like they did have a pretty distinctive like look and like civilization, which looked nothing like that was depicted. So it's like, well, and you know, like the Spartans didn't really look like that either. I mean, you know, they did have beards, but they weren't really like bodybuilders by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I mean, the reality is just way too strange. Like, there's no one. I think actual ancient Persians versus actual ancient Spartans, like, there's not. You can't really like identify with either of them now, because you're like, these are both like such alien societies where like their values don't really correspond to art. Like neither side's values like really correspond to anything anyone would consider.
What were they even fighting over at the time?
Well, like
trade routes.
I think it was just imperial expansion of was it
they're keeping the Persians out, basically.
They're trying to, I think it was Xerxes or Darius or Darius, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to cast either side now as like really like heroes, I guess, even though they try to do with the Spartans, even though their values make no sense really in modern context.
I mean, it must still be impressive in the purely sort of military strategy sense. So, like, it is true that about 300 Spartans like held down that valley and killed how many Persians?
Like, no, but I mean, they basically did like fail.
They failed,
and then Athens,
but they pushed them back basically. No,
for a little bit, but then Athens used, if I remember right, used naval power to like actually kind of win. So like the supposedly intellectual Athenians actually kind of did have some better military sense in a way. And you know, there was crossover. Like the Athenians would send their kids to train in Sparta, and then they'd like come back and kind of apply it. So there was some, you know, crossover there. But it's like it's a weird like myth where they're standing for things which modern people, well, they're big into like, I had this like weird relationship with, again, like the entire society is based on the military. So they're also like quite, like their idea of like, you know, older man, younger boy relationships. Like, so when they eventually did get married, they had to like the women had to like be like shaved to like look like a boy, because otherwise because they weren't used to like sexually recognizing women, because right as weird as that sounds, but so yeah, I mean, there's just all these things like that where it just doesn't map in any clean way onto like any modern group really, that in a way that would be, I guess, coherent or whatever.
So what, there's like, it was part of the kind of student-teacher relationship, right? Like basically the boys
it's like senpai kohai, right? Like it's like sort of like that.
I don't know too much about that either.
Well, it's just like a hierarchical training relationship where you like the, again, platonic idea of, you know, manly relationships versus man and woman relationships, which they just thought was like a
necessary for
breeding factory or something. But they didn't really think it was like holy or pure or anything. I mean, Spartan women were considered quite, even in the ancient world, they're considered kind of weird because they're just like, like go out and die or don't come home. Like they just expected their kids to just die in battle, and that's it. And like,
what were they up to? What were they all about? How would they spend their days?
Well, they had
insulting slaves.
Yeah. Well, they did like weird. Another reason it's weird is like they did weirdly have more rights. Like they had like individual women's rights in a way, and they could like sort of economically, if I remember right, participate. But
how big was their society? A few thousand, right?
It wasn't. I mean, again, the numbers are not huge here, but
so it's basically like a town.
It was very. If I remember right, it was something like 10% elites and like 90%. It might have been slightly more
again,
skewed.
Is that too different?
Not that. Yeah. Well, I'm just giving as an example of what people are maybe talking about versus what the reality might have been. But
so you have your nice noble square, and then basically they're presiding over.
But again, those elites were also expected to like die, so they weren't like sitting around having fun,
right?
Or like throwing Epstein parties. Like they're like, we're gonna like die.
Yeah,
and that's our function,
right?
And
so I mean, it sounds more honorable than now, at least, where the elites, send the slave kids to die.
Yeah, well. In some ways, yeah. I mean, you could look at it. I mean, I think even in the British Empire, there was that sense that like the officers of the nobles were expected to like directly be in the military and kind of die as well.
Yeah, and so what? Like now, compared to now, Prince Andrew was in the military, but didn't really see much action.
Ceremonial way, but he certainly wasn't taking too many bullets, right?
Yeah,
and I kind of doubt William was either. Yeah, but in theory, at least, like they were supposed to be sort of leading the charge and dying.
Yeah,
in that way. Well, even the 300 Spartans, like that's the other thing is like it was more like 600 because they did have their slaves. Well, like
probably more than that, right?
They had their slaves carrying their gear. Yeah. So,
but I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
It's just a different concept. I mean, slavery was normal in the ancient world, so it wasn't. They didn't think it was like some magically evil thing. Right. They're just like, it's normal. Like there's slaves.
Well, someone has to carry the stuff.
Someone has to carry the gear. Yeah. Everyone has different faculties or whatever. So. So they thought it was normal, but I guess just that sense in which like the values don't really cleanly map onto current values, or at least most of them. Yeah.
Kind of different topic, but have you seen All Quiet on the Western Front?
Is there a recent one, or that's a pretty old?
2 years ago, I think.
It must be a
on Netflix.
Recent remake, or that's an old book from like the 19th century.
Have you read the book?
Ages ago, when I was in high school or something, junior high school, I think.
The movie's quite good. The recent movie is quite good. I mean, it's quite chilling in just the. I mean, the message I think is just the. What's the word? But it's all useless.
That was World War I, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, that's like that's kind of a common refrain, is that like war was fun until World War I. And it stopped being fun.
Right.
Well, and I don't know, I'm not sure how fun the Civil War actually was, but I think there was at least this like romantic sort of image that I guess like some people had it past World War I. Like Patton was certainly General Patton was certainly still. I mean, he thought World War I ended too soon, and he wrote a poem about it. And he's like, "No, it's just getting started. Like, what the cowards are gonna end it already. Like, we got to continue this, right? It's just starting to get good, right?
Right.
But he did get his.
Was he serving, or was he?
Yeah, he was he was out in the front lines, and but he did get his second shot in World War II, where he caused a lot of damage and killed a lot of people, and wrote poems about it.
Okay, how are the poems?
They're very metal.
Okay,
they're like
rock and roll
they're like
metal,
Slayer.
Okay, Slayer lyrics.
Yeah, they're like Slayer lyrics, or like, I guess like, well, even Metallica, like I feel like even Metallica lyrics are like very ambivalent compared to Patton poems. Like Metallica is like, oh, like you might be harmed in war and might be turned into a, slave soldier or something. And Patton's just like, nah, like we're born for war, and fucking, it's just like, it just sounds like some Slayer death metal lyrics or something. He's like talking about being reincarnated. He's like, back in the prehistoric days, like we didn't even have swords. Like our swords were our teeth, and then blah blah blah, and like so he's just like, yeah, all of my incarnations, I was like the warrior, and like so I think Patton at least was having fun with World War I and II.
Well, that's good.
I mean, about many other people.
I just like to see the boys get out and have some fun.
Yeah. Well, he was. I think he was
play with some new toys.
I'm trying to remember which president, Eisenhower maybe like reprimanded him because there's like some shell-shocked soldier, and like soldiers that were like traumatized by combat or whatever. And Patton was like, all right, let me talk to him. Let me talk to this young shell-shocked young man, right? So he just, the soldier's just like, just like staring at the wall in shock or something. Right. Patton just goes up and he's like, stop being a coward. He's like yells in his face. Right. He's like, what's wrong with you, you little coward? Like, I'm not gonna have this in my army. Like,
right.
Just like starts like smacking him, and like,
did it work?
Like, yeah, well, probably not, right?
Probably not.
I don't think so, but so I think there was like some incident where the president at the time was like, George, like, come on, like, tone it down a little bit. He's like, Patton's like,
bad luck.
Patton's like, he's being a coward, right? Like, he's in the army. You can't be a coward in the army,
Yeah.
What's this trauma? It's not real, right? So,
yeah. I mean, there is that idea of like the military basically being a proxy, like some set of the population, some subset of the population is basically driven by the desire to kill other humans, right? Like that's
his logic. I think like Patton's logic, as he explained it, was like cowardice in the sense of hesitation is like contagious. So like if one link falls, then kind of the whole chain does, right? So
we'll need to recruit with more discrimination then, because if you're just picking up cannon fodder.
They did have the draft then. So,
then I mean, you're going to sweep up random people who want nothing to do with war.
Wasn't necessarily a choice at the time, but I just think like this is one of the. I've certainly had a lot of good times with Patton's poetic works. Because just like no one knows about this,
right?
Like everyone I've told about this is like, what, Patton wrote poetry? Like what could it possibly be about? And it's like, well, what do you think it would be? What do you think it would be about? Killing people in wars, more killing people in wars,
right?
Getting reincarnated to kill more people in wars,
right. Did he have some like did he think he was Napoleon in a past life? Or
I think he did have some like self mythology about past lives or something, where he's like talking about the will reincarnating him or something to continue the battle or whatever.
Did you ever get into this like a Nazi occult rabbit hole? Like apparently
Nazi occultism. It's pretty shallow, man. It's pretty mishmash. Really? Yeah,
but
Nazis weren't occultists.
What I heard was, I think this came from like Freud. Freud sat with Hitler, right? Was it Freud? I think so.
But Hitler
and
gave a.
Apparently he said, like Hitler said, that he believed that he was like the manifestation of some like Aryan like entity, spirit.
I'd be very. The thing is, like Hitler gave public statements where he pretty explicitly said that like Nazism is not occultism, and he's saying like there's no esoteric metaphysical component to Nazism. He's just saying like National Socialism is just like a purely folk movement in the sense that like it doesn't have like an esoteric dimension or something. And he actually says this pretty clearly. So, well, I like Hitler.
Jung, sorry, not Freud.
Oh, Jung said, okay, yeah. Well, Hitler was such an unimaginative person. I mean, there may have been some Nazis who had esoteric interests, but I think in the main they were pretty down to earth or grounded in much simpler takes on things than even like weirdly. I think Patton was even maybe more esoteric than Hitler. As weird as that sounds.
So here's a link to an essay called Wotan, an essay Jung wrote about Hitler and how he embodied the old northern god Wotan.
But Jung is kind of a fiction writer in a lot of ways, so I'd be very hesitant to give that much credence or well, I mean, other than the realm of things that Jung came up with, but.
Do you get these hentai targeted ads
sometimes,
as well?
Yeah,
okay.
Sometimes hentai targeted.
I mean,
I think they're pretty standard.
Okay,
but
in Japan, just making sure my algorithm isn't.
I think it's pretty standard.
Okay, well that's reassuring.
Yeah, nah, that's like Madame Blavatsky stuff where they had this like fake. I mean, Madame Blavatsky came up with that whole not non-Persian Aryan concept. So Aryan originally means like Persian, basically,
yeah,
or like Northern Indian or whatever. But the Theosophists in Blavatsky in the 19th century came up with this whole. It's very Dungeons and Dragons. Just like they came up with something like 6 or 7 human races, and it's very like Middle Earthy. There's the
which one gets the charisma boost?
I think it was the. I'm trying to remember what they even were. I mean, it's very science fiction-y where.
Sorry, what were they called?
Root races
by
Madame Blavatsky, or Theosophy, which was the thing at the time.
Blavatsky.
Yeah, roots.
Blavatsky.
She was this obese.
Polish or what?
I think Russian. If I remember right, Helena.
Polarian race, an ethereal, non-physical race existing in a form more akin to energy than matter. The Hyperborean race, semi-physical beings who lived in a polar region. They were less material than present humanity. Lived in an age of pure spirituality. Lemurian
Lemurians.
Race.
This is one of those lost continent things.
Like
where,
in Indonesia, right?
I think so. Yeah,
they think they like found traces of them, right? Like short humans, short humanoid race.
Yeah.
Basically.
So they're trying to trace this to. The funny thing is that they proposed like a future race that would be like Californian or something. I think they came up with
this race. So future humanity is predicted to represent a higher level of spirituality and moral development, potentially
in California or something.
Advanced psychic and spiritual abilities.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The 6th Aryan root race will evolve in the United States in the early 21st century. So
interesting.
Hope that's happening. But so they say. Believed by Theosophists to now be arising from the Teutonic subrace of the Aryan root race in Australia and the western United States, especially California. So there's this upcoming psychic Californian race, which they're taking up to the 28th century. They're like under the guidance of the masters of ancient wisdom in the 28th century, for the intensive selective eugenic breeding of 6 root race.
What if that's what's like actually happening in like Skid Row? Like from the outside, it looks like a bunch of
it could just be the enlightened masters.
Right.
Well, okay, so they're like the master,
cleverly disguised.
The master Moria will physically incarnate in order to be the progenitor. So there's all these like discarnate super masters floating around that are gonna eventually pop back in, and
I hope so.
Father some new root races or whatever.
I mean, unfortunately, all this stuff I think stems from as we are kind of talking about earlier, the desire for someone to be in control, right?
Yeah.
Like you want someone to come in and save you.
Yeah.
But
Theosophy is always really big on these enlightened masters.
What is Theosophy? You keep saying this word.
Theosophy. It was a 19th century occult movement.
Okay.
There was, I think it was like some
headed by
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Blavatsky was like one of these classic, like, I don't want to say like charlatans, but sort of like, trying to think of a modern.
Well, I just get very new age vibes from this, right?
Exactly,
like
right. So everything, like literally everything new age can kind of be traced to Theosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the 19th century new age, right? So basically what she did was just like put everything in like a blender. So you got like Hinduism, you know, I guess like esoteric Christianity and like Atlantis,
right?
And like Aryans, like just everything's in a blender, and like, you know, so
it's all part of this grand conspiracy.
It's kind of a conspiracy, and like, so
and
apparently
aliens are coming and they will save you.
Yeah, right? Well, they didn't call them aliens. They called them like enlightened masters, and they supposedly live in Tibet or something.
Okay.
And you know, they're like the secret chiefs who, they're like running things, right? They're running the show, and you know, they have this like vast centuries long plan with these like root races, and you know, going to take things off Earth and go to Mercury or Mars or something, and continue the development there. So they go into this crazy, you know, like really detailed, you know, outline for when this is all going to happen. But, you know, a lot of these ideas really penetrated to this level of like, well, yeah, Aryans, like Aryans is taken to mean like in the Nazi sense. I mean, that's where that comes from.
Blonde hair, blue eyes.
That's where that comes from, whether people know it or not. So, really, really influential stuff. And they tried to like pick their own messiah, like in India. Like they basically like went to this.
Who is they?
Blavatsky and the other leading.
Pick their own messiah. What's that mean?
So they went to India. I mean, they're very big in India. Like they moved to India, and they like, I think just like went to the beach or something, and you know, there's a bunch of little kids playing on the beach, and they literally just said, "Oh, this guy looks spiritual. We're gonna take him." So they like adopted him. His name was Jiddu Krishnamurti or J. Krishnamurti. So yeah, they just started educating him, you know, raising him to be like the Messiah, right? They called him the world teacher. So they're like, yeah, by the time he's about, you know, 2030, he's gonna be like Jesus of, you know, the 20th century, right?
He was just some kid,
some Indian kid, right? So they're like, but yeah, so they educated him specifically to be like the Messiah, right? Or the world teacher, they called him. So by the time he actually gets to be Jesus age, he starts getting a little bit like, well, wait, like, am I the Messiah, or is this, you know, am I, you know, like, to his credit, he was kind of smart enough to be sort of like, you know, maybe I'm being slightly managed here,
right? Yeah,
you know, right? So he, you know, kind of gradually distanced himself from it in a way where, you know, people would be like, "Are you the Messiah?" And he's like, "Well, good question," you know. But then he like sort of wouldn't really, you know, confirm or deny. And he eventually did kind of just break away and be like, "Well, look, you know, I'm possibly not the Messiah, but I do have some interesting things I can teach you," right? So he kind of did keep being a spiritual teacher, but he definitely backed out of the, you know, Theosophy plan.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, sounds like he had a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. So he, you know, interesting story, but yeah, I mean, Theosophy was really influential, and a lot of those ideas are still kind of around in various forms.
What about Wotan? Is this from Blavatsky, or is this?
I suspect that was Jung just going into his own
stuff,
fictional territory of as he often did, which was why Freud was always chastising him for delving into occultism. Freud was very big on like everything has to be super scientific and we're like serious physicians here. We're not occultists. We're not going into the realm of realm of fantasy or whatever.
Inspired by the okay, weird. Okay, I don't know what to make of this.
Well,
apparently
Wotan,
it's just Odin.
Yeah, it's Odin, right?
Yeah.
Wotan or Odin is just a Norse god, right? Well, he's kind of like the dying god, right? He goes, he kind of gets crucified, right? So he's kind of like a Norse Jesus, or almost, or like a dying. He loses an eye. I think he gets nailed to a tree. Undergoes all these like ordeals, and then comes back with the goods, right? So yeah, I mean he's kind of like one of these deities or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure Jung was going into fan fiction mode, as he often did. I mean, for better or worse. I mean, it's not that you can't or shouldn't do that, but
keeps things interesting.
Keeps things interesting, but Jung thought that, like, Jung's idea of the collective unconscious was that it's not like really in your head. It's like actually like a spiritual field or something. So I don't think he was necessarily saying it's like parts of your brain. Like I think he actually thought it was like some kind of mystical field or something.
Do you like how do you feel about that idea?
Well, like sure, I guess. I mean, in practice, I don't think
like what difference does it make?
I don't think it makes terribly much difference in practice. Other than maybe how you would conceptualize it. But,
there's certainly some very weird stuff which is hard to explain in terms of like standard sensory kind of ideas. Like, I mean, for example, have you ever like noticed someone staring at you from behind you?
Yeah.
Like how would you feel that?
Or
right?
something.
Yeah. Like what is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Jung was
something very tangible.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Jung was into UFOs. He was into synchronicity. Interestingly, Schopenhauer was too. I was watching this interesting video where they were talking about the later works of Schopenhauer, where he's trying to use, occultist data to prove his ideas about the will, which in Schopenhauer, Schopenhauer thought the will was bad, but
the will just in terms of will as a whole, or what?
The will, right? So so Schopenhauer didn't necessarily think that people had individual wills.
Okay,
it's almost like there's one will, and we're just.
Is it aligned, or is it just?
It kind of like, according to Schopenhauer, it kind of like sucks, right? So everything is like, people are not really people. They're just like epiphenomena. Like they're just like manifestations of this blind becoming will, right? I mean, Schopenhauer is very, kind of pessimistic and kind of Buddhist in some ways. He's influenced by Buddhism. So Schopenhauer thinks the will is bad. Crowley thinks it's good, and other people have various takes on it, on what it is, or what how it manifests or whatever.
And I mean, so did Schopenhauer separate the will from like creation?
Well, he
or God, I guess
he thinks like creation is
a
manifestation of the will.
Okay, interesting.
But
then the will is God, right? Basically, yeah.
But
so he thought it was bad.
Yeah, he thought it was bad, right? Because it's creating more and more suffering and limitations over time. Everyone is no one. There's no individual souls. There's just the blind will, which is constructing more and more kind of shitty circumstances over time. In a way. But other people have taken the opposite track and they're like, nah, the will is good, and it's all.
Yeah, I mean, to say it's bad though, I mean, well then.
Well, so his take, according to, I haven't read his later works. I've read his main world is will and representation is the main one, but according to this video I watched where he was talking about his later works, it was saying that he was using like mesmerism and psychic powers as examples of like the will, because like the will is not necessarily bound by like time and space,
right?
And so occult power. So he actually did give credence to occult phenomenon,
right?
Which he thought was like proving his kind of theory. Interestingly, and kind of Jung kind of did as well, with his collective unconscious idea, which is kind of a will, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still hung up on this. Okay, so you think the will is bad, and then I was like, okay, well, then shouldn't you depart from this realm?
Yeah.
But then that would just be the will as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the trap, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, the best you can do is cause as little suffering as you can. Don't reproduce, let it die out. But it probably, I think he was a little bit skeptical that it could ever actually be stopped or something.
Yeah.
But he was like, well, you can try to do Buddhist type stuff where you just
sounds like an annoying way to live, right? It's just like constant holding yourself back, right? I mean, that sounds like the opposite of what you should be doing. Kind of, right?
Well, Schopenhauer is a very conflicted, quite relatable person, but his philosophy is certainly very pessimistic.
Right.
But, so
why was he relatable?
Well, I mean, just large parts of his philosophy are just explaining like, everything kind of sucks, and like, daily frustrations are manifestations of deeper underlying metaphysical shittiness, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of the frustrating things he's describing are actually pretty kind of the same today.
Yeah. I mean,
it
sounds like he's correct in his observation, but maybe just pessimistic.
Well, yeah, he was a huge pessimist, right?
Yeah.
And Nietzsche, a big part of Nietzsche's project is like also overcoming Schopenhauer,
right?
Because like I think there's a meme where like it's like it's like Schopenhauer's like Little Pump or something. And then like young Nietzsche is like Ariana Grande, who's like in love with him or something.
Right. Okay.
So Nietzsche started out like really into Schopenhauer, and he's like, wait, like this sucks. Like, what if we were just like, what if the will? Well, he kind of was like, what if the will is good, or like, what if we're just like it's actually hardcore or something, right?
Yeah.
So Nietzsche eventually turned on Schopenhauer, and he's like, nah, it's just sickness, like Schopenhauer's philosophy is like mental disease or something, right? Which, I mean, sort of, you could look at it that way. And a lot of people have taken that track after him. Well, Crowley kind of says the same thing. He's just like, no, he says something like, no other Westerner has ever dropped to darker depths than Schopenhauer.
Right.
He's like, he drops to such awful depths that's almost actually Buddhist.
Right.
Is what he says.
Sick burn,
right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, so Jung was kind of on that will track too, whereas I think the collective unconscious is sort of like Jung's take on Schopenhauer's will or whatever, for good or bad, I guess. Yeah. Oh, I think Jung had more of the positive take on it. Whereas like it's good, or it's like a journey or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I want to hope that there's some redemption arc to existence, right? I mean, it'd be pretty brutal if everything just progressively gets worse and worse. Then your friends die, and then you die, and no one remembers you.
Just no one remembers it. Everything sucks. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It is sort of like that, right?
But I mean, history would seem to indicate that's what tends to happen. I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Schopenhauer is like, he has a pretty funny background where like his mother was like a novelist, I think, or like kind of a decently selling writer. And she was just giving him a hard time. Like, he was trying to learn philosophy, and release these books, and I think there's like some famous letter where she's like, like you think you're more clever than everyone, but actually like your personality is just annoying, and kind of no one likes you that much.
Wait, this was to who? To Schopenhauer?
This is his mother, yeah.
To him.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
that explains the pessimism, right?
Yeah, right. So there's some funny comics where he's just I think he had like a poodle or something. He's like holed up in his room, and he's like, Mom, get out of my room, right? And because she was trying to like give him feedback on his philosophy,
right?
And he's like, you don't understand anything about my philosophy, right? So, well, because like the other German philosopher at the time was like Hegel or something,
right.
And I think she's like, oh, if you wrote more like Hegel, your works would become popular.
Right.
He's like, Hegel is the stupidest German philosopher. Like, I don't be anything like right. So he's definitely having some personal battles in the background there, where he's coming up with this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, because Hegel's kind of like everything's getting better, like the
synthesis
and the zeitgeist and so Schopenhauer is totally the opposite, like everything sucks and fucking the will is bad and blah, blah, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's optimism versus pessimism. Is it truly that arbitrary, right? Is it just a matter of illuminating things in the right sort of light, right?
Yeah. Like you could just put it down to, that's always the question, is just like, is this just like personal pathology or something?
Right.
Like, is this just one person's temperament or take or something? Which it kind of is, right? But
is there any downside to being like ruthlessly optimistic in the face of everything?
It's a good question. I think it'd be
good
if you could. The question is like,
the thing is, it's hard to do.
It's hard to do unless you don't. If you don't have that temperament, I think a lot of it is just kind of personal temperament, maybe.
Do you think? Is it just habit?
Habits are important too. I think you can shift yourself in certain directions through habit or discipline, maybe. I don't know how much it just comes down to temperament, though. Maybe.
Well, so when you say temperament, like what? Just like neuropathology,
or just like how
sleep quality,
sleep quality, or just how you naturally sort of feel about things. Or I think there is a big.
I feel like that's just like conditioned, though, right? Like
maybe, but even like there's even if you look at babies, like some babies are screaming endlessly, and some are just pretty chill, right? So
can you draw a line between your worldview and your parents' worldview?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
I would say
you just feel completely
very different.
Very different.
Very different. Yeah.
Interesting.
Almost completely
out of the blue.
Very different.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I can relate certainly to my father. Like I kind of, for better or for worse, inherited, I think, his pathology.
Well, yeah,
psychology?
Yeah. I would say there's similarities, but I would say a lot of it seems very different, or maybe I don't know. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of similarities, but other things are maybe specifics are different. I would say maybe, yeah.
It might be one of those things also that kind of like skips a generation.
Yeah.
I ran like
my father would always complain that I'm too like his father.
Oh, interesting.
He's like, oh, you're reminding me of my old man again.
Yeah.
Like it's too similar to.
Yeah,
I think I'm like too similar to his father, which I never met his father, but sounds like he was an asshole. So
I was visiting my grandparents in the summer, and it came up that apparently, like, my grandmother was like a big risk taker.
Okay,
like, she was like into she's
like a flapper.
I don't know what that is.
It was just like fashion from the 20s.
Okay,
1920s. Yeah.
I don't know if she was. I don't know how big that was in the Soviet Union or.
Yeah.
Wait, I guess, were they born before? When did the Soviet Union start?
1930s, I want to say.
Okay, so whatever was before the Soviet Union was...
Well, revolutionary Russia, I think, was earlier, 20s or earlier.
It's funny how I'm asking you, but...
yeah, trying to remember when the Bolsheviks actually...
So I don't know how
earlier.
big...
I think the Bolsheviks did basically control most of Russia by... trying to see when the actual Soviet
But
state.
Yeah, I mean, basically what came out was that she was into like, you know, skydiving.
No. Oh, right. Yeah. 1922 is basically the start. But I think they were in power even earlier, actually. Okay. So,
and that
about 100
that
years
was
ago.
The Rah Rasputin shooting up the whatever. The
I think it was earlier. Like I think the actual...
that was the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the October Revolution was it. Then it started fracturing pretty quickly.
Right. As revolutions tend to, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so you're similar to your grandmother?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, because my dad's certainly very conservative. My mom, I mean, my mom's not really into anything like that, I guess. So I don't know. Strange stuff. Like where does it come from? Could skip a generation.
Yeah, interesting.
Or are you just am I the cross-gender reincarnation of my maternal grandmother? Just kind of bizarre idea.
Yeah, I think I
kind of look like her too, which is weird. Yeah.
I never met any of my father's grandfather never died before I was born, so don't have any personal data.
Right.
Maternal grandmother, yes, it just seemed like a awful person.
Sort of here.
Maternal grandparents just didn't really relate to them either. So I don't really know. Maybe generations back or some weird mix or something. But yeah.
So this started with me asking if you can trace your worldview to a descendant.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if you could. I mean, I think I feel like it'd be interesting if you could. I mean, I kind of I haven't super personally experienced that, as I said, but I think there probably are some currents that come together or continue to other generations or something.
Yeah. Are we doing on time here? Yeah. About 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes,
yeah. It's going pretty smoothly, though,
smooth as peanut butter. Smooth as peanut butter.
Yeah.
Kind of feel like eating some peanut butter now. Just feel like
it's delicious, right?
Tasty toasted peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah.
Something so sugary. Like, it's another one of these things where, like, if you eat it as an adult, you're like, what? It just has that, like, it just doesn't hit the same as when you're like a kid or something. You just
I still remember my first PB&J. That shit slapped.
Yeah. Like, you can eat this stuff when you're a kid and it's just like you just want it more and more and more, and there's no like downside, and it doesn't seem like there's a toll or anything. And I feel like adulthood is just gradually like, oh, should I really be eating this? Or am I gonna feel this tomorrow? Or like, am I gonna is this actually nutritionally anything?
My recent addiction is, do you know Country Ma'am?
Like the little cookies,
yeah. So they have a Country Ma'am ice cream sandwich.
Oh, really? And that sounds dangerous.
Yeah. It's pretty fucking dangerous, man.
Is it really good, or is it?
I quite like it. Yeah.
I was always a little bit iffy on the cookies because they're just so.
I mean,
very sweet and small. They're small and sweet, and they don't have that like chewy cookie goodness, really.
Yeah, I mean, you might, like, based on your reaction, you might be kind of lukewarm to it as well. But I feel like I know there's a lot of like weird sweets in Japan that
I never feel like they're. I have a hard time vibing with Japanese sweets.
Not sweets, but did you ever, the rice crackers?
Senbei,
Senbei, I guess.
Not really a fan.
I mean, my friend introduced me like a few years ago, and I ate the first one. I was like, okay, well, it's kind of like crispy, like it's kind of salty. Then I had another one, and like, holy crap, did that hit? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Because it's like the first one, like perfectly. What's the word? Like prompts you. Like it sets you up
Primes
to.
You
prime.
More.
Yeah. Like the slight saltiness on the first one, like kind of just pulls you into that. I
just couldn't really. I don't know why. Like, I just never get into senbei for some reason. Like, I tried a bunch of different ones, and it's like just washing off my palate or something. Like, I'm not really.
Are you a fan of like any Japanese snacks or?
Not really. Yeah, not really. I mean, there's nothing.
How about the jumbo monoka.
Oh, those are good.
Yeah. So it's like good. Waffle outside, vanilla ice cream, and then like
those
chocolate.
Those are hard to say no to. Yeah. I think they are like the best-selling dessert in the country or something too. Yeah, those are hard to say no to. I mean, those do kind of just hit perfectly.
Yeah.
I used to like those little ice cream cups, like the, matcha ice cream little mini cups or whatever you can get. I
never vibed with matcha. I was always like, it's just bitter, grainy.
Interesting. It was just so individual that I thought the green tea ice cream was always good.
I mean, every time I have it, I'm like, okay, it's like bitter, I guess.
Not appreciating it.
I don't know. There's no like nuance to the flavor, really.
Yeah. Just I was always into it for some reason. But that's about it. I mean, like they're very big on like crackers and little corn rice crackers. Like, I'm just not really my jam, I guess.
It's what do they call it? Otsumame?
Yeah, otsumame. Otsumame. Never really vibed with it that much. Or like little cheeses and like the old man that I drink with on Sundays. Like he drops that stuff out, and some of it I'm like, okay, this is kind of okay, but a lot of them just not really.
Hold on, senbei are the little weirds.
Well, they're like circular rice crackers, right?
What are the like orange brownish?
Well, that's senbei.
That's senbei as well.
Orange.
I don't like those, but like the kind of rice cracker.
Oh, you might be thinking of a different kind. Then senbei just means them in general, like rice crackers in general.
Yeah, but, it's a pretty broad range, right?
Pretty broad. Spectrum.
Did you ever get into dried squids stuff?
Tried, man. I mean,
I mean, it's like eating rubber. It's
I certainly have eaten my share of it.
Yeah,
because it's another famous like drinking snack.
Right.
But it just after a few years, you're like, I kind of don't actually like this, or like I'm not actually that into. Like, you want to try everything at first, but after a few years, you're like, I might give that a miss, or not really. Not so into this actually.
I'll try most stuff once, just as a general.
After rule. A few times, you're just kind of
like I know what it's going to be. Like, never.
I've gotten so addicted to these little cracker cookie things from the Konbini. They're just like very plain biscuit. Like I think they're literally just called plain biscuits, but they're just so unstoppably good. And like if you dip them in like protein yogurt. Like the oikos yogurt.
Okay.
It's so good.
You'll need to show me this.
It's so satisfying. And it's just like, they're not too sweet. They're just very like crunchy and kind of satisfying, like biscuit cookies. And I don't know. I can definitely go hard with them.
I think Asian snacks are kind of on that. That's maybe one of the defining things where it's like they're not too anything. They're not too salty. They're not too sweet.
Not too sweet. They're just kind of middle ground. Yeah.
Meanwhile, like American stuff tends to like try and slap you across the face,
smack you with
as much as possible.
Onion ranch vinegar Doritos with extra flavor. Like you're just getting chemical bitch slaps left and right, just from every 6 directions at once.
It's five rounds with Tyson.
What am I getting hit with? Is this onion? Is this ranch? Is this We've detoured from Carl Jung to Doritos.
Well, I mean, this is just desserts.
This is just desserts
on the podcast.
One interest. I think there's one amusing interview where they actually interview Jung on video, and they're like asking about his childhood, and they're like, you were growing up in this like Swiss town or whatever. Like, what was your relationship with other pupils? And he's like, I was kind of like the school bully.
Oh, he was the school bully?
Yeah, he's like, I would kind of punch them and knock them around. And,
right.
Yeah. They're like, why are you doing that, Carl? And he's like, I was just exercising my natural strength and my faculties, and he's so it's like, come on, Carl, like you don't have to abuse other pupils, And he's like, well, but it was what it was, right?
It's fair enough, right? I mean, what else? What else can you say?
What else are you gonna
do? I mean, did he continue that as an adult? Could you draw a line back?
I don't know. I mean, he was a pretty unethical doctor. I mean, Freud, by modern standards, I mean, they're both pretty, giving their patients cocaine and having sex with them, and like not really. I don't know how ethical you consider them by modern standards. I mean, I guess they were like trying to do their best. I mean, I don't think they were like
They weren't bullying them, though, were they?
Nah, they were. I think they were sincerely trying to do their best, but I don't know how. I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to realistically talk about 19th century what. It's another world, but I think they were certainly doing some edgy stuff, which probably wouldn't
by those standards, by modern, certainly.
Certainly by modern. But even at the time, I mean, I think they did tell Freud, like, can you stop giving people cocaine because they're going into psychosis from what you're prescribing.
Yeah. I mean, what was I he one of his contemporaries was addicted to morphine
or something,
and after talking with Freud, he got him into cocaine as a way to get him off morphine.
And he just got addicted to cocaine.
Well, first he got cocaine psychosis. Then he quit and went back to morphine.
Back to morphine and overdosed or something.
Overdose or either commit suicide or something.
But
rock and roll, baby.
I think we're at the edge.
It's probably a good place to call
completed
it.
Our marathon. 2 or 3 hours of podcasting. So
2 hours basically, but I think we did our best to podcast. So
peace.
Plug again, right?
Okay, Just Nicest 93 on Instagram, Just Nicest 1 on Twitter or X or whatever.
It's funny, word for word every time. It's Twitter or X,
or
right?
X. I don't know
or whatever.
I don't know what it's called.
DBLV on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Have a good week.
Later.
Catch you next time.